My son extended an invitation for a dinner to mend our rift. I was on my way to meet him carrying optimism in my chest. But a phone call from my attorney flipped my world entirely. "Contact me right away. It concerns your son." The revelation shattered me. Before we proceed, kindly subscribe to the channel and share in the comments the current time and your location. The front door banged closed with enough power to make my coffee mug clatter on its saucer. Forceful footsteps pounded over my porch. Intentional, furious strides that caused the aged wooden planks to creak in complaint. I scarcely had a moment to place my evening newspaper aside before Wayne exploded through my entrance without even a courtesy tap. "Dad, I desperately need cash. You must sell this outdated home and hand over my portion." No greeting. No regret for the invasion. Just commands issued with a frantic aggression I'd never encountered from my boy before. His cheeks were flushed crimson. His pricey suit creased as if he'd been pacing in his vehicle for ages before summoning the courage to charge inside. I stood up gradually from my armchair, motioning toward the kitchen with whatever poise I could gather. "Wayne, you seem distressed. Allow me to brew you some coffee and we can—" "I don't want your damn coffee." He waved his arm dismissively, almost toppling the lamp on my end table. "I want explanations. I want what's owed to me by right. Your portion." The phrase emerged harsher than I'd planned. My hands shook faintly as I clutched the chair's back. "This is my home, Wayne. I've labored my entire existence for it." He chuckled, a sharp, empty noise that bounced off my living room walls. "You're going to pass away soon regardless. What do you need this massive place for?" The viciousness of those statements struck me like a tangible strike. This was my child, the lad I'd instructed on bicycle riding right in the driveway he'd just stormed across. The young fellow I'd escorted at his wedding ceremony. Now he positioned himself in my residence, my haven, declaring me as good as deceased. "Wayne," I began, searching for any remnant of the child I'd nurtured, but he wasn't done. He pounded his fist onto my coffee table with such intensity that the wooden top leaped. "You're acting selfishly. Emily and I face costs you couldn't fathom. Actual issues. Not merely lounging here scanning papers all day like some worthless— Leave." The command escaped my lips softly, but with utter decisiveness. Wayne halted mid-phrase, his jaw dropping. I said, "Leave my home." I directed my finger at the door, my digit firm despite the fury swelling in my torso. "And don't you set foot on my land again." For an instant, Wayne appeared truly stunned. Perhaps he'd anticipated I'd fold, surrender my life's efforts without resistance. His expression shifted from bewilderment to rage to something more sinister. "You'll rue this, old-timer." He pivoted toward the exit, then whirled back to confront me once more. "When you're rotting solo in some care facility, recall that you selected this." The door crashed shut behind him with greater ferocity than upon his arrival. Through my front pane, I observed him stomp to his sleek black BMW, gun the motor fiercely, and peel away from my driveway swiftly enough to etch tire streaks on the pavement. I remained there amid the abrupt quiet, my pulse thumping against my chest. The residence seemed altered now, tainted in some manner by the venom Wayne had injected into it. Beyond, the March twilight was descending into nightfall, and the lamps along Maple Street were starting to illuminate. My limbs felt shaky, so I lowered myself back into my armchair. The newspaper sprawled on the floor where I'd let it fall when Wayne first intruded. The coffee in my mug had chilled. I approached the front door and engaged the lock, an action I seldom took, but this evening demanded it. My digits rested on the cold steel as I attempted to absorb what had transpired in my own parlor. The hush felt dense, stifling. I navigated the space leisurely, my house shoes scuffing the hardwood floors that Margaret and I had restored together 2 decades prior. All appeared identical to how it had been 60 minutes earlier. Yet everything seemed alien now. I paused at the mantel over the hearth where our family snapshots lined up neatly. Wayne's high school commencement image beamed at me. Cap and robe, that triumphant look when he'd gained entry to Ohio State. I'd pulled extra hours at the engineering company for 3 months to cover his initial semester fees. My fingers outlined the silver border. 42 years I'd provided him with all. University funded by me, initial vehicle, assistance with the home loan when he and Emily acquired their starter residence. The sentiments lingered in the vacant atmosphere. I lifted another picture. Wayne's marriage day, his arm encircling Emily, both radiating joy. I'd covered half of that event as well. $15,000 I'd set aside for my retirement. Willingly transferred because I desired my son to enjoy an ideal occasion. Shifting to my armchair, I nestled into the familiar leather padding that had conformed to my form over time. This seat had been Margaret's final holiday present to me before the illness claimed her. She'd accumulated savings for months, purchasing it incrementally on installment at the local furniture shop. I extended for the framed image on the side stand. Margaret and I on our 35th milestone, merely 2 years prior to her departure. Her silver locks were impeccably arranged, her grin sincere and affectionate. Margaret, if you could witness what our boy has turned into. But would she? Had there been indicators I'd overlooked? I attempted to recollect when Wayne began altering. Was it following Margaret's passing? Or had the shift been so incremental that I'd merely declined to acknowledge it? I tallied in my thoughts, a practice from my engineering career. Wayne's education, $68,000 in sum. His nuptials, my $15,000 input. The initial payment advance for his home that he'd never reimbursed, $25,000. The startup funding when he'd launched his advisory business, another $30,000. Assorted crises, vehicle fixes, birthday surprises, holiday offerings. The figure continued escalating. Across the last 20 years, I'd bestowed upon Wayne over $200,000. Not borrowings, donations, funds I'd delivered because he was my offspring. Because I cherished him. Because I aimed to aid his achievements. And this evening, he'd positioned himself in this exact chamber, insisting on additional, not requesting, insisting, as though my life's endeavors, my dwelling, my stability signified zilch against whatever monetary pit he'd excavated for himself. I believed I'd nurtured a respectable individual. Where did I falter? The inquiry reverberated in my thoughts as I lingered there in the deepening shadows. Outside, the vicinity was easing into its nightly pattern. I could detect the Hendersons' canine yapping 3 residences away, the faint murmur of TV broadcasts from the Patel's home adjacent. But within my abode there was solely stillness, and the burden of a disloyalty I was still striving to grasp completely. The antique clock in the corridor told 8 chimes. Margaret had received that timepiece from her mother, and it had maintained flawless rhythm for 43 years. Dependable, consistent, reliable, qualities Wayne evidently lacked. I shut my eyes and allowed my head to recline against the chair's support. Come morning, I'd require clear thinking to determine what this clash signified for my tomorrow. But this night I simply dwelled with the ache of realizing that the son I'd adored without conditions viewed me as merely a barrier to his legacy. The structure groaned around me, easing into darkness. The dawn had unfolded serenely. I'd prepared my standard morning meal, 2 eggs sunny side up, whole grain bread, dark brew, and perused the Columbus Dispatch cover to cover. The regimen assisted in calming my jitters after the prior day's outburst. I'd even succeeded in nurturing my modest herb patch on the rear deck, inspecting the nascent spring sprouts that were emerging. Now I occupied my kitchen table with my midday coffee and the word puzzle, attempting to preserve a semblance of regularity. The dwelling felt tranquil once more, as it ought to. Rays of sun poured through the delicate drapes Margaret had installed ages ago, projecting soft designs over the oak surface. When the telephone chimed, I checked the display and sensed my gut clench. Wayne. I permitted it to sound twice additional, my palm lingering above the handset. A portion of me desired to divert it to messages to uphold the limit I'd established the previous evening. But another segment, the one that had parented him for 42 years, couldn't disregard the summons. Hello, Dad. I wish to express regret for yesterday. I was mistaken. The tone was altered, gentler, remorseful in a manner Wayne seldom exhibited. I straightened in my seat, my hold firming on the device. Wayne, what occurred? You rarely offer apologies. A hesitation. When he resumed, there was an element resembling true remorse in his voice. I recognized I was behaving like an egotistical fool. The remarks I made regarding your passing, about the residence. Dad, I'm embarrassed by my actions. I gazed out the kitchen pane at Mrs. Patterson's floral shrubs, endeavoring to digest this abrupt reversal. In all the years since Wayne matured, I could tally on one hand the instances he'd conceded error on any matter. I don't know, son. You uttered dreadful things yesterday. I understand. I did. His voice wavered a bit. I've been facing immense strain recently, but that's no justification. You didn't merit what I inflicted on you. Can we discuss over supper, please? My unoccupied hand tapped the tabletop. This seemed off somehow, too opportune, too impeccably scheduled. But it was also what I'd yearned for during those extended hours last night. Some indication that my son retained a moral compass concealed beneath his urgency. Wayne, please grant me an opportunity to rectify it. The refectory restaurant this evening at 7. My expense. Let me demonstrate that I can be the offspring you instilled in me. The refectory. Wayne was aware it was my preferred eatery. The spot Margaret and I had commemorated each milestone for the final decade of her existence. He was tugging every sentimental chord he could locate. But perhaps that signified something. Perhaps it indicated he recalled what was important to me. That a fragment of him still valued repairing our bond. I surveyed my silent kitchen at the vacant seat opposite where Margaret once sat for our midday chats. The isolation I typically suppressed surged forward. The truth of dining every repast unaccompanied, of lacking someone to exchange the minor instances of daily life. All right, I found myself uttering, but this is your final opportunity. Thank you, Dad. Thank you immensely. 7 o'clock at the refectory. I assure you won't lament this. After disconnecting, I stayed seated at the kitchen table for an extended period. The word puzzle remained incomplete next to my now tepid coffee. Outside, the afternoon sunlight pursued its gradual path across the heavens. But something had altered in the serene cadence of my day. I desired to trust Wayne's remorse was authentic. I desired to trust that yesterday represented his nadir, and that he was prepared to ascend back to the individual I'd endeavored to foster. But there was a minor, insistent murmur in the recesses of my mind that uttered cautions I wasn't fully prepared to heed. I rose and proceeded to the schedule affixed to the fridge. Tuesday, March 11th. I encircled the date with a crimson marker, though I wasn't certain why. Perhaps because I intuited that this supper would prove significant in one fashion or another. 4.5 hours until I'd discover if my son had genuinely rediscovered his path to me, or if this was merely another form of treachery I hadn't yet conceived. I placed the phone aside and ascended the stairs to prepare, my steps resounding in the hushed corridor. Despite Robert's lack of specifics, Wayne's contrition had rung true, more authentic than anything I'd heard from him in ages. Maybe individuals truly could transform. Maybe yesterday marked his lowest point. Positioned before the bathroom looking glass, I examined my image. The figure gazing back seemed more aged than I recalled, more worn by recent happenings. Silver bristles coated my face and jaw, rendering me appear fatigued, vanquished. This evening demanded superior presentation. I applied the shaving foam meticulously, forming it into a dense lather. The accustomed process felt contemplative, intentional. Each pass of the blade eliminated not only stubble but portions of the day's strain. This supper was crucial. If Wayne was sincerely prepared to atone, to compensate for yesterday's harshness, then I owed it to our connection to meet him midway. Proceeding to my bedroom wardrobe, I pondered my choices. The navy ensemble dangled beside my charcoal one, both ironed and prepared. I selected the navy. Margaret had always claimed it accentuated my eyes, made me appear refined rather than merely elderly. The act of attiring felt ritualistic. White formal shirt, crisp and stiffened as I'd mastered in the military 5 decades past. As I fastened my neckwear, I glimpsed Margaret's accessory case on the bureau. She'd stored my cufflinks there, the silver pair her folks had presented for our union. 2 neckties rested across the bedspread, maroon and azure. The maroon complemented my favorite handkerchief, but the azure had been Margaret's choice. "Makes you seem dependable," she'd invariably stated. This evening I opted for dependability. I chose the azure. At Margaret's vanity, I uncapped the modest vial of aftershave she'd bestowed for our 25th commemoration. The aroma conveyed me immediately, Yuletide morn 1982. Margaret chuckling as I feigned astonishment at the present I'd observed her package 3 days prior. "For noteworthy events," she'd remarked, pecking my cheek. Tonight felt noteworthy in its own intricate manner. I dabbed the scent lightly on my wrists and throat. Margaret would be pleased to witness us reunited. She'd always advocated for fresh opportunities for the potential of atonement. "Folks err, Columbus," she'd declare, following especially challenging days with adolescent Wayne. What counts is if they grow from them. My billfold rested on the bedside table, bulky with the month's retirement funds I'd exchanged yesterday. I tallied the notes, ample for supper at the refectory, even if I demanded to settle despite Wayne's proposal. Long-standing customs persist, and I'd been covering tabs for my offspring their whole lives. Keys grasped, I inspected my reflection once more. The man in the glass appeared respectable, honorable, prepared to extend his son another shot. Perhaps I assessed Wayne too severely. Individuals can evolve. Tonight will mark a new beginning for our kin. Advancing toward the chamber exit, I sensed something I hadn't felt since prior to Margaret's demise. Optimism. Genuine optimism that our family could mend. That the severe utterances of yesterday might be pardoned and overlooked. Wayne remained my son irrespective of his missteps. And sons, I concluded, merited the advantage of uncertainty from their dads. I extended for the illumination control, set to descend and journey to what I anticipated would be our mending. I extended for my overcoat dangling near the entrance when my phone vibrated in my breast pocket. The noise sliced through my hopeful disposition like a knife through fabric. I nearly disregarded it. Whatever communication had come could hold until post-supper. But something prompted me to halt, my arm midway to the garment's arm. The alert displayed a message from Robert. "Call me urgently." My fingers abruptly felt awkward as I punched his digits. Robert never employed emphasis, never dispatched pressing notes unless matters were gravely amiss. The line rang once, twice, then his known voice responded. "Robert, what transpired? Why the urgency? Columbus, your son Wayne contacted my office today. He was inquiring about your testament." The statement struck me like icy liquid. I braced against the corridor wall, my neatly tied azure neckwear suddenly constricting around my throat. What precisely did he seek to learn? He questioned if all assets transfer to him or if there's a division for Loretta. Then Robert hesitated, and I could sense him selecting his phrases deliberately. Then he asked about challenging the testament. "Challenge it, but for what reason?" My tone sounded odd to my own hearing, empty and remote. Through the front pane, I could view the Hendersons strolling their pet, the identical nightly habit they'd observed for 15 years. All outside appeared ordinary, serene, while my reality skewed. "Columbus, I believe Wayne is scheming something harmful. Exercise caution tonight." I pressed my spare hand to the wall for steadiness. The aftershave Margaret had gifted me abruptly smelled overpowering, suffocating. "Robert, are you certain?" Maybe he simply wanted clarification. He inquired particularly about your cognitive capacity stipulations, about what would occur if someone asserted you weren't of rational faculties when you endorsed the papers. Sound mind? The phrase echoed in my head as pieces began falling into place. Yesterday's explosive demand for money, today's sudden convenient apology. The dinner invitation to a public place where witnesses could observe my behavior. My reflection stared back at me from the hallway mirror. An old man in a blue tie, dressed for dinner with his son who might be planning to have him declared incompetent. The hope I'd carried downstairs evaporated, replaced by something cold and hard. What should I do? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. "Don't go, stay home, let me handle this legally." But even as Robert spoke, I was shaking my head. Wayne thought he could manipulate me. Thought I was just another weak old man ready to be pushed around. He was about to learn otherwise. "No," I said firmly. "I'm going to dinner, but I won't eat or drink anything until I know exactly what he's planning." "Columbus, please." "I've handled worse than my own sin, Robert. But thank you for warning me." After hanging up, I stood in the hallway for a long moment, studying my reflection. The man looking back at me was no longer hopeful or naive. This was the Columbus who'd survived Korea, who'd built bridges that still carried traffic 40 years later, who'd buried his beloved wife and kept going. Wayne wanted top-play games with his father's legacy. Fine, but he was... Maybe Robert is wrong, maybe Wayne just wanted to know his inheritance rights. The light turned green and I accelerated slowly, staying in the right lane. A young woman in a red sports car passed me, probably thinking I was just another cautious old driver. She wasn't wrong, but tonight my caution had a different purpose. No, after yesterday's fight it all makes sense, but I can't believe my son would another red light. A homeless man stood at the corner with a cardboard sign, and I found myself wondering what had led him to that intersection. Bad decisions, bad luck, family betrayal. I reached into my wallet and handed him a $5 bill when he approached my window. He thanked me with genuine warmth, then moved on to the next car. At least someone would benefit from my evening preparations. I continued driving, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. The familiar landmarks of Columbus passed by, the convenience store where I bought my morning newspaper, the pharmacy where I picked up my heart medication, the barber shop where I'd been getting haircuts for 30 years. This was my city, my life, my routine. Wayne thought he could just swoop in and claim it all. I'll be careful. Won't eat or drink anything until I'm sure of his intentions. The decision felt solid, logical. Wayne might be planning something, but he was dealing with a man who'd spent his career calculating load-bearing capacities and stress tolerances. I could handle whatever scheme my son had devised. As I turned into East Broad Street, the Refactor's distinctive sign came into view. The restaurant sat in a converted church, its Gothic architecture both beautiful and somehow ominous in the gathering dusk. Margaret and I had celebrated so many anniversaries there, back when I believed family meant something sacred and permanent. Traffic slowed as I approached the restaurant district. Office workers were heading home. Couples were arriving for dinner dates. Families were gathering for Tuesday evening meals. Normal people doing normal things. Unaware that somewhere among them a father was driving to confront his son's betrayal, I signaled for the turn into the restaurant's parking lot, my pulse steady despite everything. Whatever Wayne had planned, whatever trap he thought he was setting, I would be ready. The naive father who dressed hopefully in his bedroom mirror was gone. In his place sat a man who'd learned, perhaps too late, that trust was a luxury he could no longer afford. But I would still be his father, even if he'd forgotten how to be my son. I parked in the restaurant's lot and sat for a moment, watching other diners walk toward the entrance. Normal families, normal couples, normal people who didn't suspect their loved ones might be plotting against them. The Gothic architecture of the converted church looked welcoming in the soft evening light, its stained glass windows glowing warmly. Wayne and Emily were waiting just inside the entrance, their faces lighting up with what seemed like genuine joy when they spotted me. Wayne rushed forward with open arms, pulling me into an embrace that felt completely different from his aggressive stance 2 days ago. "Dad, how wonderful that you came. I've been thinking about our relationship all day." Emily joined us, her smile radiant as she took my arm. "Mr. Lane, you look fantastic." Wayne told me how much he regrets yesterday. Their enthusiasm felt overwhelming, almost theatrical. But standing there in their warm embrace, surrounded by the gentle murmur of other diners and the soft classical music, Robert's warning seemed paranoid and distant. "I want things to be good between us two, son." Wayne guided us to a window table he'd apparently reserved, one with a view of the downtown skyline twinkling in the gathering darkness. Emily helped me with my chair, fussing over my comfort like she'd never done before. The waitress appeared immediately as if summoned. "We took the liberty of ordering wine," Wayne announced, gesturing to the bottle of Cabernet already breathing unthettable. "Your favorite vintage from when Margaret was alive." Emily filled my glass with practiced grace, her movement smooth and deliberate. "This will be perfect for our reconciliation toast." I raised my glass, feeling genuinely touched by their attention to detail. They'd remembered Margaret's favorite wine, chosen our old anniversary table by the window. Maybe I'd been too quick to judge Wayne's motives. "To family," Wayne said solemnly, his eyes meeting mine. "To second chances, to forgiveness," Emily added, her voice warm with apparent sincerity. The wine tasted exactly as I remembered, rich, smooth, with hints of cherry and oak that Margaret had always identified for me. As we talked, Wayne seemed like his old self, the son who'd once helped me build a treehouse in our backyard, who'd called me every week during his college years. When the appetizers arrived, Emily pushed the bruschetta toward me. Wayne said, "This was your favorite here. The tomatoes are from the chef's garden." Course after course appeared, each dish seemingly chosen with my preferences in mind. Wayne carved the prime rib himself, placing the choicest cuts on my plate. Emily kept my wineglass filled, attentive to every empty bite. "Try this steak, Dad. The chef is a friend of mine, prepared it specially for you." The meat was perfectly seasoned, tender enough to cut with a fork. Wayne watched me eat with satisfaction, his face glowing with what looked like paternal pride in reverse. "And this sauce is incredible." "The restaurant's recipe," Emily added, spooning more of the rich herb-laden sauce over my portions. Throughout the meal, they shared memories I'd forgotten. Family vacations, Christmas mornings, moments when Wayne had been the loving son I'd always believed him to be. Emily told stories about their marriage, their hopes for children, their desire to be closer to me in my later years. By dessert, the wine and their warmth had completely dissolved my earlier suspicions. This was my family, flawed but loving, trying to heal the wounds we'd inflicted on each other. Robert's warning seemed like the paranoid concerns of a man who dealt with too many divorces and family disputes. Wayne paid the check with a flourish, waving away my attempts to contribute. "Tonight's my treat, Dad." My apology. Walking to the parking lot, I felt lighter than I had in months. The cool March air was crisp and clean, carrying the promise of spring. Wayne and Emily hugged me goodbye with what felt like genuine affection. Let's do this again soon, Wayne said, his hand warm on my shoulder. I drove home with the windows down, humming along to an oldie station. The drive home had been pleasant, filled with thoughts of reconciliation and hope for our family's future. I'd even stopped at the corner store to buy Wayne's favorite coffee, thinking I might invite him for breakfast later in the week. The house felt welcoming when I returned. No longer the fortress I'd retreated to after yesterday's confrontation, I settled into my reading chair with the evening news, feeling more content than I had since Margaret's death. The wine from dinner had left me relaxed, almost drowsy. Around 10 I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and considered calling Robert to tell him his concerns had been unfounded. That's when the first wave of nausea hit. It started as mild queasiness, the kind you might blame on eating too rich a meal too quickly. I'd certainly indulged more than usual tonight. But within minutes, the discomfort escalated into sharp, cramping pains that doubled me over in my chair. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I stumbled to the kitchen sink as bile rose in my throat. My legs suddenly unsteady beneath me. The cramping intensified, sending lightning bolts of agony through my abdomen. This wasn't indigestion from too much prime rib. The vomiting started without warning, violent retching that left me gasping and shaking. Between spasms, my mind raced backward through the evening. The wine Wayne had chosen, Emily's insistence that I try everything, the sauce she'd kept spooning onto my plate. Robert's warning echoed in my head. Columbus, I suspect Wayne is planning something bad. My hands trembled as I reached for the kitchen phone, each movement requiring enormous effort. The numbers on the keypad blurred as another wave of nausea crashed over me. I could barely hold the receiver steady. 911, what's your emergency? Hello, emergency services. I'm very sick. I think I've been poisoned. Address is 1247 Maple Street. Sir, stay on the line. What are your symptoms? Severe stomach pain, vomiting, dizziness. I ate dinner out tonight. And another spasm cut off my words. Sir, can you stay conscious? A crew is already heading to you. The dispatcher's voice seemed to come from very far away. I slumped against the kitchen counter, the phone sliding from my grip. Through the haze of pain, one thought burned clear. My son had tried to murder me. The sound of sirens grew louder outside. Red and blue lights flashed through my front windows, painting the familiar walls in emergency colors. Heavy footsteps approached the door. Mr. Lane, Columbus Fire, and EMS were coming in. A paramedic appeared at my side, a young woman with kind eyes and steady hands. She checked my pulse, shined a light in my eyes, asked questions I could barely answer. Mr. Lane, can you hear me? We're taking you to the hospital. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, I caught sight of my reflection in the hallway mirror. Damon, looking back, was pale, aged years in a single evening. But beneath the physical distress, his eyes burned with something harder than pain. Understanding. The ambulance pulled away from Maple Street, carrying me toward Mount Carmel East Hospital and away from the house where I'd lived in innocent trust of my family for too long. Consciousness returned gradually, accompanied by the steady beeping of monitors and the antiseptic smell that defined hospital existence. Sunlight filtered through Venetian blinds, casting narrow strips across starched white sheets. My mouth felt cotton dry in an IV line snaked from my left arm to a bag of clear fluid hanging beside the bed. I tried to sit up, but weakness kept me horizontal. The events of last night rushed back. Dinner, sickness, ambulance, the betrayal that had nearly killed me. Mr. Lane, you're awake. A woman in a white coat entered, carrying a tablet and wearing the expression doctors reserve for delivering serious news. She was perhaps 50, with graying hair pulled back and intelligent dark eyes that suggested both competence and compassion.
How are you feeling?
You were brought in critical condition last night. What happened to me, doctor? I'm Dr. Patel, your attending physician. We've been running tests all night. She pulled a chair close to the bed, sitting down with the deliberate movements of someone preparing for a difficult conversation. Tests show presence of a strange substance in your bloodstream. Ricin. It's a plant-based poison derived from castor beans. The word hit like a physical blow. Ricin. Not some accidental food poisoning or sudden illness. Deliberate murder. But where could I have? The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. Oh, my son, that scoundrel tried to kill me. Dr. Battle's eyebrows rose slightly. Mr. Lane, if you suspect intentional poisoning, you need to contact police immediately. This is a criminal matter. Written, I'd read about it in engineering journals years ago. Case studies of industrial accidents. Highly toxic, difficult to detect, nearly impossible to treat once symptoms appeared. Wayne had done his research. How bad is it, doctor? You were fortunate. The amount in your system suggests someone wanted to make you very sick, possibly fatally so, but you received treatment quickly. With supportive care, most rice poisoning victims recover fully. Most victims. The words carried ominous implications about the minority who didn't survive. Dr. Patel continued with clinical precision. Ricin typically takes several hours to manifest symptoms, which matches your timeline. Initial treatment involves removing the poison from your system and managing symptoms. There's no specific antidote. I closed my eyes trying to process the magnitude of Wayne's betrayal. Yesterday I'd been a father hoping for reconciliation with his troubled son. Today I was a murder victim who'd survived by luck and quick medical intervention. The police will need to collect evidence. Your medical records, details about where and when you believe exposure occurred. Evidence. The restaurant. The specially prepared meal. Wayne's insistence that I try everything. Emily's careful attention to my wine glass. Their coordinated performance of loving family members. Welcoming Dad back into the fold. How long before I can leave? Another day or two for observation. We need to monitor your kidney function and ensure all traces of the toxin are eliminated. After Dr. Battle left, I stared at the ceiling tiles and contemplated the new reality. My son, the boy I'd taught to throw a baseball, whose college education I'd funded, whose wedding I'd helped pay for, had tried to murder me for my inheritance. The family I'd grieved for, hoped to reconcile with, no longer existed. In its place stood cold-blooded killers, who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to their financial security. Wayne thought he was dealing with a helpless old man. He was about to discover just how wrong he could be. The taxi dropped me off at the Columbus Police Department's main building on Marinay Boulevard. Dr. Patel's discharge papers and medical records sat in a manila envelope tucked under my arm. Evidence that would put my son behind bars where he belonged. The fluorescent lights in the lobby buzzed overhead as I approached the front desk, where a uniformed officer looked up from his computer screen. "I need to report an attempted murder," I said, my voice steady despite the magnitude of the words. Within 15 minutes, I was seated across from Detective Sarah Mitchell in a small interview room that smelled of coffee and disinfectant. She was a woman in her mid-40s with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that had seen enough family violence to take my case seriously from the start. "Mr. Lane, please tell me in detail about last night's events." I spread the hospital documents across the scratched metal table between us. The toxicology report showed ricin levels that could have killed a younger man or an older one who hadn't received treatment quickly enough. My son Wayne invited me to dinner after a fight we'd had Monday. Now I understand it was a trap. Detective Mitchell studied the medical records, making notes in a leather-bound pad. Her expression remained professional, but I could see the concern growing in her eyes as she absorbed the details of what Wayne had done. "Are you certain the poisoning occurred at the restaurant?" "Absolutely. Wayne insisted I eat that specific dish and drink that wine. His wife Emily kept refilling my glass, pushing different foods toward me all evening." I walked her through the entire sequence of events. Monday's explosive confrontation, Robert's warning about Wayne's suspicious legal inquiries, Tuesday's manipulative dinner invitation, and the carefully orchestrated meal that had nearly killed me. The ricin was probably in the sauce, I explained, remembering Emily's insistence that I try more of the special preparation. "The wine." They worked together, made sure I consumed enough to do the job. Detective Mitchell leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the notepad. "Mr. Lane, this appears to be a clear case of attempted murder with premeditation. We'll need to arrest your son and his wife for questioning." The word sent a surge of satisfaction through me. Justice. Finally, justice. Wayne's been desperate for money, drowning in debt from bad cryptocurrency investments. He called my lawyer, asking about my will, specifically about contesting it if I were declared mentally incompetent. "That establishes motive," Detective Mitchell said, making another note. "Along with the medical evidence and your testimony, we have grounds for immediate arrest." She explained the process. Arrest warrants would be issued within hours. Wayne and Emily would be taken into custody, and a prosecutor would review the case for formal charges. As a primary witness, I would need to testify at trial if the case proceeded that far. Detective, they thought they were dealing with a helpless old man they could manipulate and then murder. They miscalculated. By 4:01, Detective Mitchell had recorded my complete statement and logged all the medical evidence. She walked me to the lobby, shaking my hand firmly at the door. "Mr. Lane, we take attempted murder very seriously, especially when it involves family members targeting elderly relatives. Your son and daughter-in-law will be in custody by tonight." I walked out of the police station into the late afternoon sunlight, feeling lighter than I had since before Margaret's death. The legal machinery was in motion now, grinding toward the justice Wayne thought he could avoid. 2 days had passed since Wayne and Emily were arrested at their suburban home, led away in handcuffs while neighbors watched from their doorways. The local news had picked up the story, son attempts to poison father for inheritance, and my phone had been ringing constantly with reporters and distant relatives expressing shock. I ignored them all. Today I had business to finish. Robert's law office occupied the second floor of a brick building downtown, its walls lined with legal volumes and certificates that spoke of decades of practice. He'd been my lawyer for 15 years, handling Margaret's estate and my retirement planning. Today he would help me rewrite the future. "Columbus, are you sure you want to completely exclude Wayne from the will?" I sat across from him at the mahogany conference table, where we'd signed so many documents over the years. The new will lay open between us, its pages crisp with legal language that would strip Wayne of every cent he'd expected to inherit. Absolutely. A person who tried to kill me doesn't deserve a cent. Robert adjusted his reading glasses, reviewing the document one more time. We'd spend an hour going through every asset, every bank account, every possession I owned. The house on Maple Street, the retirement savings Margaret and I had accumulated over 40 years. The life insurance policies and pension benefits, everything would go to Loretta. The entire house, savings, pension funds, everything goes to Loretta. That's right. Loretta Hasselway's been a good daughter. My mind went to my daughter, who taught 3rd grade at Wilson Elementary and had never asked me for anything beyond birthday gifts for her children. She didn't even know about Wayne's arrest yet. I decided to wait until after the trial to explain everything. The shock would be devastating enough without the added burden of suddenly becoming wealthy. Robert leaned back in his leather chair, studying me with the careful attention he'd always given to important matters. "Wayne might try to contest the will in court. Let him try. I have evidence of his crime. The attempted murder charge would be Wayne's biggest obstacle in any legal challenge. No court would award inheritance to someone who tried to kill the testator for that very money. The medical evidence alone would destroy any contest he might file. We'll include specific language about the criminal charges," Robert explained, making notes in the margins. "That way, even if he's acquitted on a technicality, the will explicitly states your reasons for disinheritance." I watched him work, remembering all the times he'd helped our family through legal complexities. He'd handled Margaret's medical directives during her final illness, helped us set up trust for the grandchildren's education, guided us through tax planning that had preserved our modest wealth. Now he was helping me ensure that wealth went to someone who deserved it. The signing ceremony took place at 2, with Robert's secretary and paralegal serving as witnesses. I read through every page of the new will, confirming that Wayne Lane was mentioned only to be explicitly excluded from any inheritance whatsoever. My signature felt different this time. Not the shaky hand of an old man making routine legal updates, but the firm declaration of someone taking control of his legacy. The notary's seal made it official. Wayne would get nothing. "The will is now legally binding," Robert said as we shook hands. "Wayne's attempted murder has cost him everything he thought he'd inherit." Walking to my car, I felt the satisfaction of a man who'd outmaneuvered his would-be killer. Wayne had gambled his inheritance on one deadly dinner and lost it all. The month since changing my will had passed in a blur of legal preparation. Wayne and Emily had been denied bail, flight risk, the judge had determined, so they'd spent the weeks before trial in county lockup. Robert and I had met repeatedly with the prosecutor, reviewing evidence and preparing for what promised to be a straightforward case. This morning, Loretta sat beside me in the courthouse hallway, her face still pale with shock from learning about her brother's crime. I'd told her everything 3 days ago, including her new status as my sole heir. She'd cried for an hour, grieving the brother she'd thought she knew. "Dad, I still can't believe Wayne would do something so horrible," she whispered as we waited for our case to be called. "People change, sweetheart. Sometimes they become strangers wearing familiar faces." The courtroom was smaller than I had expected, with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lighting that cast harsh shadows across the proceedings. A handful of spectators filled the gallery, mostly reporters and curious court watchers drawn by the sensational nature of the case. Wayne and Emily sat at the defendant's table with their court-appointed lawyers, both looking haggarded from their month in custody. Wayne had lost weight, his expensive suit hanging loose on his frame. Emily kept her head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone. "Mr. Lane, please tell the court about the events of March 11th. The prosecutor, a sharp woman in her 30s named Jennifer Walsh, guided me through my testimony with practiced efficiency. I recounted the entire sequence. Wayne's desperate demands for money, his manipulative dinner invitation, the poisoning that had nearly killed me. Your Honor, my son invited me to dinner with the intention of poisoning me for me inheritance." In the witness box, I felt calm and focused. This was my moment to ensure justice, to make certain that Wayne's crime received appropriate punishment. The jury listened intently as I described the ricin poisoning, the hospitalization, the realization that my own son had tried to murder me. Tests confirmed the presence of ricin in the victim's system. The prosecutor announced, presenting Dr. Patel's medical reports to the jury. Wayne's lawyer attempted a defense of accidental poisoning, some far-fetched story about contaminated restaurant ingredients, but the evidence was overwhelming. Wayne's inquiries about my will, his financial desperation, the coordinated behavior at dinner, Emily's careful attention to my food and drink. When the jury returned after 2 hours of deliberation, their faces were grim. "Wayne Lane and Emily Lane, the court finds you guilty of attempted murder in the first degree." Wayne's composure finally cracked. "Dad, I didn't mean it was an accident." I looked at him across the courtroom, this stranger who'd once been my son. "An accident? You asked about my will the day before poisoning me." The judge sentenced them each to 15 years in prison with possibility of parole after 10. Wayne would be 77 when he got out if he lived that long. Emily, 65. Their lives effectively over, their futures destroyed by their greed. Loretta and I walked out of the courthouse together, leaving Wayne and Emily to begin their journey to state prison. The April sun felt warm on my face, promising renewal and fresh beginnings. "What happens now, Dad?" "Now we live, sweetheart. We live with integrity, the way your mother would have wanted. Justice had been served. My family's betrayer would spend the rest of his productive years behind bars, while my loyal daughter would inherit everything I'd worked to build. The moral order had been restored, and I could finally rest easy, knowing the right person would carry on our family legacy. Wayne had gambled everything on one poisonous meal. In the end, he'd lost far more than my inheritance. He'd lost his freedom, his future, and any claim to being called my son. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.